What's up, everybody? It's the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. We are going to be coming at you with a lot of different news and some inside scoop, I suppose, on a particular quarterback that we all know and love. And there's a lot of stuff being talked about with him this week as the Bengals get they're not getting set. They are hitting the field for OTAs, and we're getting the first glimpse at rookies and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to talk about all that good stuff. I'm Anthony, and he is John, the talent, Sheeran. John, how you doing, buddy?
Doing well. Coming off of my first appearance on Talking Football with Bengal Jim and friends, even though Bengal Jim himself was not present. I believe he was flying back from a trip out into the Pacific Northwest, so not quite Anthony's territory, but still the West Coast nonetheless. So that was a lot of fun talking with Tom and James, talking ball there. And yeah, we've been in a new era of Bengals football, but Anthony, I thought it was funny listening to one of the rookies, I believe it was Jermaine Burton, talk after rookie minicamp today on Friday, talk about how the indoor facility that the Bengals have is really cold and how far we've come from having these guys battle out in the summer heat with no indoor facility to now, man, it's a little chilly inside that nice indoor facility. Well, how much times have changed, I guess.
Yeah, we used to clamor for that indoor facility, and now we're almost like spoiled, right? Now it's like, oh, now it's just we're acting like big boys now. We're acting like the regular teams at this point. Yeah, go check out that episode with John on Talking Football with Bengal Jim and friends. I wasn't quite sure how to take the compliment that Tom, I was called a star, but you were called the talent. So I don't know if that was a double compliment. I don't know if that was a slight to me or a joke. I didn't know, but I liked it anyway.
I didn't clear that. I didn't clear that at all. That was flung upon me too, but I think he tried his best. So appreciate him.
It was a good show. So let's talk about let's talk about some things here, John. We've got a lot to get to. By the way, if you are new here, hi, welcome. We do stream live to a number of different platforms, including Cincy Jungle's Facebook page, our YouTube channel, in which you can subscribe below underneath John by that Cincy Jungle icon. We have our show icon right down there. So click that, click the subscribe button, click the bell to be notified when we go live and when new content is available. Give us a thumbs up as well. We appreciate that. We also stream live to a few different Twitter accounts. So check us out there. And now, as we have announced for the better part of 2 weeks, we are part of the Believe podcast network. So you can go, if you find the Believe network, find the Believe in Cincy channel, which includes Bengal Jim show, our show, 3 and Out with Jason and Kevin, and Matt Minnick doing his thing on his show. All of those, we got carried over to the Believe network. So happy to be a part of that. Check that out and resubscribe to the channel as well if you like the audio side of things. That way you can get notified when all of our stuff's back up and we have new shows, et cetera, et cetera. So go check that out. But that being said, John, where do we want to start here? Do we want to start with the sad news, the departures? Do we want to start with the upbeat news, like you said, seeing some new faces and a lot of old faces take the field? Where do you want to start, my friend?
Maybe it's not sad, but we should probably go over the players that were here before and are no longer with us. This sounds really
I know it's kind of yeah.
They're still around, but they're just not in Cincinnati. Let's start with
side note. It's weird that you say that. Side note: I was driving today, and all of a sudden I just look over. It's like an empty highway, pretty much, because it's like 10, 11 a.m. I look over and there's a hearse next to me. I'm going, okay, I don't know what that means there. But anyway, yeah, when you're saying, no longer with us, I was like, it made me think of that. Anyway, go ahead.
So yeah, we had two former Bengals who signed away to different teams this week, or I believe at least late last week. For starters, there was Marcus Bailey, who has been a special teams savant, staple of that group, staple of just the linebacker core for the past 4 years. He was a part of that pretty legendary at this point 2020 NFL draft class, but never really got onto the field as a starter, never really saw his chance to really elevate himself within this defense outside of special teams. So he is joining Jonah Williams on a 1-year deal with the Arizona Cardinals, obviously a team that is desperate for talent all over that roster. They had 12 draft picks for a reason. They're just replenishing the entirety of the depth chart. So he's looking to make his name kind of known out there, and let's see what he can do with a year. And also signing a 1-year deal with another team is Tyler Boyd. Finally, he is off the market after the NFL draft and free agency. The bulk of free agency has passed, and he is joining a couple of former Bengals teammates and obviously the former offensive coordinator for the Bengals, Brian Callahan's a guy that he's worked with for the past 5 years with the Tennessee Titans. So he signed a 1-year, I believe, $4.5 million deal to give Will Levis another weapon in that receiving core. Receiving core that Anthony, it's kind of up there in age. Like you have DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley and Boyd, who are all like in and around 30, but nonetheless experienced, known quantities or at the receiver position, guys who've played a lot of football, guys who've played a lot of winning football. And yeah, another weapon to see what Brian Callahan can get out of Will Levis, and of course a receiver that he's known for a long time and knows how to use.
Yeah, I mean, you got to figure there's just the familiarity and how Callahan's going to use him. I mean, that's obviously going to be he knows how to best use him, right? And I think Boyd's been a captain here, providing leadership there in Tennessee. Like you mentioned, young quarterback. I think all of that just kind of makes a lot of sense for them. And I mean, Callahan kind of building his team there. They drafted Latham, right? Weren't they the ones that drafted Latham in the first round as well? So trying to get more physical, trying to make some moves to better their team. And Boyd does that. Even at this point in his career, I think just it'll be a reliable ancillary target for Levis, and kind of one of those guys that on third down they'll probably look his way quite a bit. So Bailey, a little bit of a different. I mean, I think we kind of as free agency unfolded, and then you had the Burrow deal last year and all that kind of stuff. When you saw T. Higgins get franchise tag, you kind of saw the writing on the wall a little bit, with Boyd probably not being in the future plans, which is a shame. He's a fan favorite. Like I said, he was a good leader. He was here for some really fun years. He was here for some not so fun years, and he played pretty much the same way, regardless if the team was a 2-win team or, on their way to the Super Bowl. And so, breaking up that trio is kind of difficult. The Bengals made draft selections that they feel can help out the wide receiver group in these last two classes, whether that's Yoshi, whether that's Charlie Jones, and of course Burton this year. So they feel that they've maybe gotten better. But that's to be. So we know at wide receiver they have some other players that they have drafted as possible replacements, or maybe if they're different players, they can kind of recreate some, if not all, of what Tyler Boyd gave you, especially in his prime. Bailey, a little bit different. The Bengals haven't really. They have their 2-star linebackers, Wilson and Pratt. Bailey, did get some spot time on defense. Always played well on special teams. Always just did everything. Did everything you want. And John, a really good story. We'll talk about it. Those guys being on our program a little bit later, but a guy that you always rooted for because he was probably a day 2 type of talent coming out of college, and the multitude of injuries. What do you have? Like knee injuries to both knees type of thing, and all kinds of different stuff. Fell all the way to the 7th round. Still didn't get that much of a shot on defense, but still a player that was pretty valuable behind the scenes for this team. And so now the Bengals have to figure out what they're going to do on special teams, and kind of get that Bailey-like performance from somebody else on this roster.
I almost feel like with Bailey, he was drafted about 5 years too late for the Bengals. What I mean by that is, like you said, like he had the ability to potentially develop into a starter if he was ever given the chance. And unfortunately, he was drafted a year after Jermaine Pratt. He was drafted 5 or 4 rounds after Logan Wilson. And those two guys, Pratt and Wilson, became the starters of the defense. And that's just remained the case for the past 3 years now. So both those guys have stayed healthy. They've stayed in the starting lineup, and there was never really a chance for Bailey to elevate himself. In years past, before they had these stable options at this position, I mean, everyone remembers the linebacker position was a constant turnover of failed starters and failed experiments at that position, aside from Vontaze Burfict for most of the 2010s. It was a problem under the later part of the Marvin Lewis era. And if Bailey was, part of those teams when they were constantly turning to like the Carlos Dansbys and the Kevin Minters of the world, and guys who were far less talented than that, I wonder if Bailey would have had a shot to show his athleticism and show the talents that would have potentially got him drafted a lot earlier had he not suffered a lot of injuries. It goes to show that despite pre-draft projections and whatnot, if you're drafted that late, it is hard to really elevate yourself, especially at a position that already has a lot of talent in front of you. So unfortunately, the stars never really aligned for Marcus Bailey, but I think we could all agree that if he had been given a shot, I think it would have been interesting to see what would have came from it.
Yeah, I wish I had the video queued up, but we had asked him when he was on the show about being a 7th round pick and, his mindset going in and, did he feel he should have been drafted a lot sooner, all that sort of thing. And he kind of gave both an inspiring answer and, an answer that also was kind of a little bit of player speak too, but a guy that I just have a lot of respect for. And, I think has overcome a lot and, on his way out of Cincinnati, left nice messages for fans in the city and all kinds of stuff. Boyd the same way, just went about his business the right way. I've had the pleasure not only of having him on our show, John, a couple of times, but got to meet him in 21 actually at Jeff Ruby's a couple nights before the game against the Vikings there. And what a guy, just incredibly nice, incredibly, I've noticed that he's kind of just the same guy across, it kind of, whether he's being interviewed or you meet him in person or, any of that stuff. He's just a low key, really kind guy. And I wish him well. It's going to be a guy that they see this year, right, against Tennessee. So, I think the Bengals are a little bit better equipped for the Boyd departure maybe than Bailey, but Bailey is a guy who had a lower profile role than Boyd has had, obviously, with the team.
Yeah, in that respect, there is potentially a spot or two open at linebacker for, I think, a couple of these undrafted guys that we're going to talk about to make a run for the roster. If not, they'd make other moves or something like that. But yeah, the Bengals prepared themselves to move on from Boyd, and that's why they kind of left him out on the market for any team to sign, all the way through the draft. I think they had a good idea of what receivers they were targeting in the draft, and whatever receiver they ended up taking relatively early, like that was going to be the guy to take his snaps, to take his targets. And yeah, like I think the reason why there wasn't really a path for Boyd to come back was if he were to come back, it would have been for a lot less money and for a lot less snaps and playing time. And I think for a player with his, standing in the team and his previous roles and whatnot, I think it was definitely the best to just move in a different direction instead of essentially demoting him. And yeah, if he was on another team, he would be revered as one of the best receivers in a lot of franchises' history. But the Bengals' history of wide receivers is so rich that he may get lost in some of the pages, but a lot of impactful moments. And I think his time in Cincinnati ended at the right point. I think any further, it would have just been kind of drawn out a little bit. And also, man, I just completely lost my train of thought. That is crazy. Oh, no, so I think fans are also, I think with with the news about T and Trey requesting trades, and there's past memories of Whitworth and Willie Anderson, a lot of franchise greats that may have ended on bad terms in Cincinnati. I think with Boyd, it's about as good as you could possibly expect. A second round draft pick who was productive in his early years. He signed, a handsome extension for 4 years and was really productive in that extension. And then when he hit free agency again, he just opted to go in another direction. He found a decent landing spot, and the Bengals are in good shape too. And I think both sides ended on good terms. And you're rarely going to see the case where, a player plays his entire career with the team. That situation, even for quarterbacks, is pretty rare nowadays. So it wasn't going to be the case with Boyd. It may not be the case with a lot of other fan favorites that may come down the line. But I think the way that Boyd's career at Cincinnati panned out and how it's now transitioning to his next phase, it's about as seamless as you could expect in the modern day of the NFL.
Yeah, here's I hope everybody can see this. I'm sharing a picture that was taken that I mentioned. That's my nephew there in Jeff Ruby's, and it's great guy, and he's a fan favorite for a reason. And I mean, it's kind of we're talking a little bit about how they can replicate and replace and all that kind of stuff, but also a little bit of a tribute to both of these guys, two guys that just did things the right way and probably just made a lot of business sense. Tough decision, regardless, and the Bengals feel, especially at wide receiver, that they're pretty well prepared. And this kind of goes into Mr. Whisper. Thank you again, Mr. Generosity. Did you send an email with your contact info? We got to get something out to you, man. But this kind of goes with the question here, with all of the additions and subtractions from free agency and the draft. What is your overall view of the team now? Are there any lingering concerns for a position group? I'm going to say this just because we were talking about the wide receivers. And again, not a knock on Boyd necessarily directly, but I mean, the Bengals wanted to get faster at wide receiver, right? And so they needed to get more speed on the field. And they feel that they did that. They feel that they did that with the addition of Burton. They feel that they did that with the two guys last year. And so I think now, there's a little bit more sizzle and speed from different spots at the wide receiver group, making it perhaps even maybe a little bit more complete. Now you lose that kind of bigger, Boyd was like 6'2", I think. You lose kind of that bigger guy that goes across the middle potentially, but Burton makes big plays. And you still have, you're hoping for kind of a bounce back year from T. Higgins and all kinds of different things. So, I mean, I think the wide receiver group has rounded out pretty nicely despite Boyd being gone. Some linebacker stuff, we talked about that. The Bengals, I mean, I think they did pretty well in terms of getting some guys to bolster the defensive line, but they have to have consistent pass rush from the interior, and they have to have a consistent pass rush from someone not named Trey Hendrickson as well from the outside. So for me, we can talk offensive line. I think they've done kind of a lot there as well. Well, I mean, Trent Brown really, but for me, it'll come down to, can this team rush the passer? Can they do it consistently? Can they do it from different spots on the defensive line?
They definitely handled the roster turnover pretty well. I think this will be viewed as a productive free agency class compared to the likes of 2021 and 2022. The main difference is you're not getting a lot of long-term impact because none of the deals are longer than 2 years. Obviously, rookies and draft picks, those are 4 years, standard, whatever. But the quality of players that they brought in, I think, match what the team needed at those specific spots. If we want to look at Burden, obviously, the sizzle that you mentioned, that will allow him to not only play in the slot, but also on the outside, give you vertical options from both alignments, and provides you more diversification, versatility with how you can align your receivers, which compared to when you had Tyler Boyd only in the slot, that is a big upgrade. And obviously getting anyone who can generate yards after the catch and put stress on defensive backs other than Jamar Chase, that is an absolute plus. And from the greater sense of the overall roster, they lost a lot of snaps. I think the biggest loss is still going to be DJ Reader and just how they kind of adjust with that and adjust their scheme because they don't have anyone remotely close to who he was at that position. If that position even exists anymore within the structure of Lou Narumo's defensive front, him and Marion Hobby really have to conjure up something in the next couple of months to really adapt to that. So I think fans should feel pretty good about the roster, at least from a right now perspective. Obviously, with a lot of these new players not really locked in for the long term, there are questions in the next couple of years. But I would say everything seems to be pretty airtight, solid, outside of, I would say, cornerback depth, because we don't know how Dax Hill is going to transition there, what they're going to do at nose tackle, what the plan is with McKinley Jackson, if they're just going to ask him to beat DJ Reader, if they're going to have to, make some adjustments and really rely on a heavy rotation there. I would say those are probably the two biggest areas of these could be problems, but if those are your two biggest problems, I think the roster overall is in pretty good shape.
Yeah, and again, if you bolster that pass rush, if you are able to get push, that makes life easier on the defensive backs and the cornerbacks, right? I mean, there's potential for more errant throws and all that kind of stuff. The other area that I find intriguing, I'm simultaneously excited about the position group, and I'm also a little bit hesitant because it's going to be a whole new approach, and there's a little bit of an unknown because at running back since 2017, we knew it was going to be 1,000 to about 1,200 yards on the ground, another 400 to 500 yards through the air, and upwards of 8 to 12 total touchdowns usually from Joe Mixon. And so now it's going to be by committee, and they didn't invest in a running back in the draft class, which I found very interesting. So that means high hopes for Chase Brown and probably a high role for him, right? And of course, Moss coming over in free agency, and they feel that, again, another one of those tough departures from a guy who meant so much to the franchise, and Joe Mixon. They just feel that, what is it, the sum of the parts is greater than the whole, this sort of thing. And so maybe they feel that they've just, despite not having that star power necessarily in that backfield, they feel that they can create some different things and probably get a little more activity, particularly out of Chase Brown with, screen game and all that sort of thing, because we saw him explode in that aspect last year.
Yeah, I think I'm with you, and I was surprised that they didn't draft a running back when they still had 10 picks to use, even on day 3, when typically those picks don't really end up mattering for the long term. But you can typically find, if you're gonna draft a position late in the draft and have any expectations for him doing something, running back is typically the safe bet to make. So the fact that they didn't, I think, speaks volumes to either what they felt about the draft class or how much that they're going to lean on both of the top 2 guys, which would be Moss and Brown. And that makes total sense because, again, I think it's, if you're losing something in terms of talent and established, a known quantity there in Mixon, the guy that you're bringing in better be exactly who you're looking for. And I think that fits with what Zach Moss is, a great pass protector, someone who can gain yards after contact, 2 obvious upgrades over, the deficiencies that Joe Mixon had. And the fact that you're going to give Chase Brown more opportunities to run the ball and create explosive yardage. You need explosive plays out of the run game. I think both guys can bring that, and you're not heavily relying on one guy or the other so much as, giving both those guys rest throughout the games as they, kind of share the load there, and hopefully, they can get something out of Travion Williams as the third guy in that rotation. So it wouldn't be a shock to either of us, I think, if one of these undrafted guys ends up making the team to round out that position group if they do end up keeping 4. But yeah, definitely going to lean a lot on the rookie from last year and the new guy this year.
Yeah, we haven't talked a lot about the UDFAs. I'm going to share, I think it's from Cincinnati Bengals, the list rundown here of players. We've got a couple. I may see, drop this down so it fits, and maybe we can see most of. Yeah, there we go. So hopefully everybody can see that. You got the defensive end Justin Blazek from Wisconsin Platteville, wide receiver Cole Burgess out of SUNY Cortland, and halfback Noah Kane, interesting player out of LSU, 5'10", 222. So that's a guy to watch, definitely. Linebacker Aaron Casey out of Indiana, halfback Elijah Collins out of Oklahoma State, and other intriguing guys. And maybe those are some of the players that can, push to get on the back end of that roster if they need. Safety Michael Dowell, as if the team didn't get enough defensive backs and safeties this offseason, they got another in Michael Dowell out of Miami of Ohio. So pretty good player there. Cam Grandy out of Illinois State. PJ Jules, another safety out of Southern Illinois. Quarterback Rocky Lombardi, pretty big guy, 6'4", 225 out of Northern Illinois. And really went after, look at that, Illinois State, Southern Illinois, Northern Illinois, right there, John. They really went after Illinois kids there. McNamara, interesting battle to watch this offseason with him and Brad Robbins. McNamara was looked at as one of the best in the draft class, really, at his position. Offensive tackle Eric Miller, huge guy, 6'8", 311 out of Louisville. Wide receiver Trey Mosley out of Michigan State. Maema Jongmeta, hopefully I'm saying that correctly, out of Wisconsin, a linebacker there. And cornerback Lance Robinson out of Tulane. So a couple linebackers that could potentially step into that Marcus Bailey role, depending on how things shake up there. But a couple of really interesting running backs, since we've been talking about that position group a little bit, that may get a look at some things.
I would say, that's a lot of players, and maybe only a handful have a legitimate chance of making the team. I think the things that maybe stick out the most for me, Aaron Casey and Njong Meta from the 2 linebackers. I think they were, if they weren't given like the highest signing bonuses, they were given two of the biggest
Yep.
out of this class. So that
Yep.
you typically got to follow that type of thing in terms of projecting how much the team values them and how likely they are to actually make the team, and frankly, like how they feel about the position as a whole on the roster. Because they only have four guys, I think, that were week one guys last year, and I think Devin Harper, who was added on waivers, is technically the fifth linebacker right now. So there's definitely opportunities for both those guys to make the team. McNamara, I don't know the details of his contract, but he was by some outlets like a legit draftable punter. I don't know if they wanted to end up drafting a punter for the second year in a row, but I know that people who scout punters and go into all that data, like they pegged him as like a legitimate day 3 prospect at the position. I guess the top punter was the guy from Iowa who ended up going in the 4th round. I don't think the Bengals were ever really in on that, but he was probably the second or third best in this class, and some of his numbers in production from college, they look a little better than Brad Robbins. So it's interesting, Anthony, like the past couple of years now, I think every time that there's been a punter battle, the new guy ends up coming out on top, whether that be before the season or during the season, because that's when Drew Chrisman eventually took over for Kevin Huber. Rocky Lombardi has the best name in football, I think. I don't know, like there's no other analysis than that, but it's a 10 out of 10 name.
It's a meld of boxing legend and football legend. I mean, it's like holy moly. Parents did him right there,
His grit rating in Madden is like 110. Like, I mean, there's just no more that you can say. Eric Miller, another 6'8" tackle. At this point, we got to start the threshold at 6'8" for any new offensive tackles that the Bengals want. And last but not least, I guess this doesn't really have much to do about a lot of things, but Lance Robinson, the guy from Tulane, the cornerback, I believe he's a childhood friend of Jamar Chase. So I would imagine that Jamar Chase took that news of his childhood buddy joining the team. But yeah, cornerback, a lot of depth that needs to be made up there in terms of snaps lost with the Woozy out the door. So chance, I mean, yeah, undrafted cornerbacks have done a good job of trying to make their way in Cincinnati. Allen George is like the most recent example, so I wouldn't count him out just yet.
Yeah, and we just talked about him. Tony Arnold said, you guys never mentioned Elijah Collins. He's going to surprise a lot of people. Potentially, like I said, I find him to be pretty intriguing, particularly since the Bengals didn't add someone in the draft. The thing is, I mean, he's like a super senior. He was at Michigan State for 5 total seasons and then ended at Oklahoma State. Never really, at least there's one season where he kind of wowed in terms of the rushing average, 5.7. But most of them are mid 4s, and that's still solid. But, college football for star backs, usually you see that more consistently at that 5+ yards per carry. And then, kind of not a ton of touchdowns, 13 total on the ground, only 38 receptions in all of those seasons there. I think he's, kind of one of those, bigger back, physical, and I think could potentially suit the division pretty well here, but we'll see what happens with him. Intriguing player for sure, but good group for the Bengals. Now, as it always goes, John, I mean, I get asked by people a lot, especially out here, what do you think about the Bengals this year? What do you think about their draft? What do you think about their offseason? And I'm like, yeah, it's, good. And we talk about it and a little bit, but we all know, man. I mean, we can talk about these guys and we can talk about the shape of the roster and everything. It all comes down to the health of 9, right? If 9's healthy, they'll be in it, and they'll probably be in it towards the very, very end if he is playing to the level that we are accustomed to when he is healthy and if he is fully healthy. Now, he's looking pretty good from what we've seen, and you like the fact that the recovery timeline is on or even ahead of schedule with him throwing right now. We had heard rumblings, I believe it was in March, that he already kind of began throwing and doing some light workouts, and now it's looking like, the reins are off a little bit, and he's throwing a lot of passes, and he's putting some zip on, and a lot of the players are saying, whatever he did this offseason, it's working. It's, he's got a lot of zip on the ball, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yet, John, and I want to reference something that you wrote for A to Z Sports 2 in a minute, but yet through it all, the talking heads, be it Mr. Nick Wright, who just loves basking in anything negative that is happening with Cincinnati Bengals, whether it's a handful of others talking about how there is a possibility that Joe Burrow may or may not be the same Joe Burrow that we've become accustomed to because of the injury that he sustained. And there's not really a historical record of a professional quarterback having the same kind of injury, I guess, to his throwing wrist and that sort of thing. So some of the stuff that has come out about him from people out there is a little bit of, to use an older phrase, hogwash a little bit, right? Some of it does kind of breed a little concern, but you recently interviewed a prominent orthopedic surgeon on A to Z Sports, and he had some interesting notes to take about this injury, the recovery, and what to expect going forward.
Yeah, so I had the privilege of speaking to an orthopedic surgeon by the name of Jeffrey Kutsakovich. Unfortunately, in the interview, which will not go public, I butchered his name completely, and I felt really, really, really embarrassed. But the interview itself was really great, and it ended up turning into an article for A to Z Sports. And the reason why I wanted to do this was because the hogwash.
Quickly, quickly. How'd you come across this doctor? How did you?
Right. So he is a part of, I believe, the Bone. Let me just make sure I'm not butchering the name here. The Bone and Joint Institute in Tennessee. And A to Z Sports, like we were based in Tennessee. We've grown connections with a lot of these doctors, and he specializes in hand and wrist in those operations. So he was the guy to talk to. We've talked to a lot of these doctors in the past, and they've given us great insight on a lot of other injuries. And this was my first time speaking to one of these doctors, but the board certified. They're on, they're highly credited and have great history in the industry. And the reason why we wanted to speak to an actual doctor with actual expertise is because of the hogwash that you, Anthony, referenced earlier this week. There was, this excuse me, a wannabe reporter who was spewing misinformation about Joe Burrow breaking a bone in his wrist. Of course, the week when he comes back and starts throwing, and everyone looked and saw him throw for the first time and said, yeah, like, he looks completely normal. He looks like he's fine. It's like he never would have even known that he suffered a torn ligament in his wrist. So I wanted to get some knowledge here of like actually what in general what this injury details and what the recovery is like, and that's what I did. And really the main takeaways that I wanted to express in the article is that whether or not Joe is throwing itself is not going to be like the high stress activity on his wrist, because the power and the torque from throwing the ball, your wrist is a part of it, but it's not like one of the critical parts. Of course, it's like it's right next to the release point. It's going to have a role in it, but throwing in practice and getting those reps in, which he definitely needs because he only started throwing about a month ago. It's not what's going to like be the real cause of concern. The inflammation in his wrist is going to be there whether or not he throws the football. But obviously, throwing, doesn't necessarily, ease anything. So inflammation is going to be something that he deals with for the next several months, probably even leading into the season. And I wouldn't have, that's not like a true, crazy revelation. I'm sure he was dealing with inflammation with his torn ligaments in his knees. Or in his knee a couple years ago when he was coming back from that. That was soreness that he had to deal with. That's why you had the brace in there as well. And that's why you had compression sleeves to really, keep it warm and everything. So inflammation is going to be something that he deals with over the next several months and probably leading into the season. But throwing itself is not going to damage the wrist. And the notion that he'll never be able to throw with the same torque and velocity ever again because of this injury is completely unfounded with the expertise and the experts who do this for a living. The real risk here is that if he were to re-tear it, pretty soon after tearing it the first time, the surgery, the operation for fixing that would be total reconstruction, and the results of that are a bit concerning as to whether or not he could ever return the same again. And the most likely scenario which that would happen is at the same type of collision, him using the wrist to brace himself against the ground, exactly what happened with Jadeveon Clowney, the Ravens. That's the only way that could probably happen. And again, that hit itself was so rare that this is the first time that we know that a quarterback has gone through this. And that's why he couldn't find any other quarterbacks to reach out with this process. He could only find offensive and defensive linemen, trench players who, deal with these collisions and have guys falling on them all the time. So the injury itself was pretty rare, and for it to happen again would also be rare. But the longer that he goes without taking contact since the initial injury, since the surgery, obviously the more it's going to strengthen up and the less likely something like that is ever going to happen. And that's the main takeaway. Yes, there is a risk of re-tearing it, and just re-tearing it in general would lead to a more complicated surgery. And this surgery was already a little less common compared to, repairing some other ligaments. But he himself has said that he's not clear for contact until probably sometime this month, but probably up until June. He's not taking contact until August at the absolute earliest. And that's only if something really bad happens in the preseason, something that they weren't necessarily planning for. So in all likelihood, he's not taking a hit until September. And by then, his wrist will regain a lot of the strength that it had in terms of just that ligament, kind of going back to normal. And it's already in a good enough spot for him to be throwing and resuming a lot of activity. So I think the reaction to this article, I didn't expect it to have that much of a doom and gloom vibe, but I think that's how some people kind of took it, because this is actual insight about the risks and the process that these players have to go through. But in general, the arrow is definitely pointing up. This was a successful surgery. He's back to throwing like he's normally has, but yeah, it is going to take some time before he's truly 100%. And how he handles taking on contact for the first time with that wrist, it's just like anything. It's like the first time he got sacked off of the torn ACL. How would he respond? Would he be taken aback by it? The whole mental thing. So he's been through a lot of these things before. This just happens to be a new injury.
Did he explain the process of what was actually done in the surgery? Was it, because I have something I can personally share on this front, and I will in a little bit, not to gross everybody out, but was the ligament detached and reattached via an anchor to a bone, or did he go into any specific detail on how that all happened, or not really?
He didn't go into that specific detail. He just explained what the ligament is. So it's the scapholunate ligament, which essentially connects to, I think there's around 8 bones in the wrist and in the carpal tunnel region in that area. But this specific ligament is responsible for attaching those 2 bones. And when that ligament's not there, that is when a special type of arthritis called slack wrist can develop. And obviously, you don't want your star quarterback dealing with arthritis at the age of 27. So that ligament is very important.
And in the throwing wrist. Yeah.
Yeah. And I believe, I keep losing my train of thought. This is crazy. But that ligament,
I cut you off.
No, it's fine. The success rate of the surgery was the interesting part for me, because he said that typically in orthopedics, 90 to 95% is the common success rate for a lot of the more common ligament surgeries. This one was 75 to 80%, just because essentially the area which they're operating, it's a very small area where they're putting stitches, and that can lead to potentially more complications compared to more common ones. But still, 75 to 80%, still pretty high success rate. And this is also, Burrow didn't just go to some random doctor for this. He went to obviously a really highly regarded specialist in Pennsylvania. Right. He's getting the best possible care. And also with that inflammation, it's not just Burrow who's dealing with inflammation. I'm sure plenty of NFL players deal with inflammation throughout the season anyways. It's something that teams are entirely prepared to do and take care in an immediate fashion. He mentioned injections, medications. These are things that he can get care for really quickly. It's not something that he has to wait on, or there's just going to be long-term persisting problems. It's just something that he's going to have to deal with and monitor. That's why he said he's going to have good and bad days with the soreness. The soreness is the inflammation from just working on it, and it's just recovering on its own. So these are things that I think he was pretty prepared for once he got all the information, and now it's just us learning about it for the first time.
So if you've watched this show for a little while, a couple of years, etc., you guys probably may remember that I had, and it's kind of odd because I played sports forever and ever, and I never really had any major injuries, but it was actually weightlifting, and I on my left non-dominant arm popped my triceps tendon, just snapped it right off the bone there, and I had to have surgery to reattach it. And the reason I bring this up, and that's why I also brought in the question about anchored, because that's what they had to do. They had to anchor my my ligament or my tendon back to the to the bone there. Um, so my point of bringing that up is, I mean, I still right now I maintain a lot of activity. I still lift weights. I do all this kind of stuff. It took me obviously a little while to recover from that, and it's a different type of thing than Joe Burrow has, but it's still the root of the problem is still the same. And I can tell you, I mean, I get stiffness in there. I get in that elbow area, that lower tricep area. Sometimes it feels if I rest my elbow a long time on a hard surface, it feels like I've hit my funny bone. That weird tingling sensation. And I mean, it takes extra stretching. It takes all kinds of. I can tell you that just from firsthand experience with the injury that I have. But I did that when I was 37, 38 years old, not 26, 27 years old like Joe Burrow. So his recovery and all that kind of stuff and bounce back is probably quite a bit higher. And I am by no means anything close to an athlete like Joe Burrow, but I assume his bounce back and recovery process is a lot better at that age, having to suffer that kind of injury than mine was. But again, he's a professional athlete. He's in care with, a number of great professionals that are monitoring this whole situation and keeping an eye on it and making sure that he doesn't have, a lot of discomfort or loss of strength and that sort of thing. I just, it's one of those things that at time. And I like the quote about pain management and managing just how he feels, because I can tell you for me, it's like, hey, I'm not going to, do triceps today. Right. It's pinching a little bit. It feels a little weird. So I'm not going to do it. And there's probably a similar aspect to that. He's probably going to deal with, extra discomfort that he never really had before in that area. He's probably going to deal with some, like I said, extra tightness that he needs to have some stretching and other things done. Probably regular PT work, right? Physical therapy work and all that kind of stuff to make sure that everything's on track. But to sit here and, these people that aren't, they say they have these sources and they say they have all this inside information on things. And it just feels like a total attention grab. It feels like a total clickbait scheme. And I mean, unfortunately for a couple of them, it worked for me because I looked at it and or, retweeted something or whatever. But I just don't see this, like you said, I don't see this as a doom and gloom thing. It's more, okay, you're going on this path. Oh, we have this deviation off of that path. Now, how do we work through that deviation and how do we work through the issues that come from that? And knowing number 9, he's going to find a way, right? I mean, that's just who he is. And so, regardless, though, these big injuries got to stop with him. They've got it. It's not sustainable for him in his football career. It's not sustainable for the Bengals' success, obviously. And I mean, you just don't want to see anybody get hurt, anyways. But it's like, okay, I have faith that he can overcome this and be the guy he's always been with the Bengals. But it's like this has to stop. It's way too early in his career to have this many large injuries, too many off seasons that are limited or missed or that sort of thing.
Yeah, the last thing that you want is for things to pop up. I think with this specifically, it was such a rare injury that we didn't have a ton of information on it. We're learning new body parts. We're learning new names of ligaments. We're learning new surgeries and everything. And that's why I felt like, it was necessary for us to at least get some general knowledge on the subject. And one of the things I saw in the feedback for the article is that, yes, like this is a lot of valuable information, but obviously what Burrow is going through is unique and specific to Burrow. Every injury is unique. Anthony, your torn tricep was unique to you, and your recovery was unique to you. Like, we can digest the information on what the average recovery is, what the average percentage is, and that's the point of the article. And if you're scared about reading it, like, I would just recommend just digesting the data and taking it for what it is. But at the end of the day, this is Joe Burrow. He's getting the best care possible. Like, his job is not, he doesn't have a 9 to 5 when he does the rehab on his side work.
Exactly what I was going to say.
His job is the rehab at this point. Obviously, practicing football. So that, like, he's been through this before, and maybe that's a little lazy. Like, oh, if you do it before, you can do it again. But no, like, if there are any select people in the world that can get through something like this. He is one of them, and his situation is independent and unique to his. The data it's just the data at the end of the day, and that's it. And just getting any clarity on that, I think, is helpful for a
Yep.
productive conversation on what the actual typical injury and recovery and surgery is. His numbers may end up looking a little bit different, potentially a little bit more positive, right? So that's the nuance and the context that I would recommend anyone having while reading the article. But definitely educate yourself on what an expert has to say, because at the end of the day, me and Anthony can only say so much about stuff with our bodies.
Yeah, and I mean, again, you kind of took the words out of my mouth there when I'm explaining my injury recovery and little like annoyances that I have with that injury, even a couple of years later. Um, you know, I I'm not my job isn't to stay stretched, stay I try and stay healthy, I try and work out, I try and do all that stuff, but that's more like recreational for me. That is not professional. That's not my profession. So again, Burrow, hey man, my wrist is really flaring up, or oh, it's really tight. His job is to be an athlete, maintain the health of his body, and that's also the team's job, is to make sure that everything's in order too. So that's where when I say I just gave my example because I've had a somewhat similar injury and I still have some annoyances, but again, my profession is not an NFL quarterback. So it's monitored a lot more strongly and more effectively than probably how I do it. So anyway, we just wanted to talk about that, and that was a great interview, great piece that you put together there, John. I linked it in the live chats. We'll probably put that in the show description too, so you can check that out. And yeah, so that being said, John, I think we're going to start scooting out of here. What do you got here for the good of the order as we drop the mic and start getting on out of here?
Just because I know she's listening, happy early Mother's Day, Mom. I'll see you Sunday.
I you cut out for me there. What was that?
Oh, just I know she's listening, so happy early Mother's Day, Mom. I'll see you
Oh,
Sunday.
nice. What are you doing? What are you doing for it?
We're I think just hanging out with the family, and then going to see the extended family later. So should be fun.
Nice. Awesome. Yes. Happy Mother's Day, Mrs. Sharon, and happy Mother's Day to my mom, all the great moms out there. Definitely hope you have a good and relaxing holiday there. I'm trying to find this. I know I've got a clip somewhere of this thing I've been trying to find, but having a little trouble finding it. But yes, happy Mother's Day. Definitely want to echo that. And again, a goodbye and good luck to a couple of I mean, I know we said the same for Joe Mixon when he left here, but Tyler Boyd and Marcus Bailey were again, valuable members of this team, valuable members to the team that made long runs and deep playoff runs, etc. So they'll be missed, but I think also the Bengals are pretty well equipped to withstand those losses, and hopefully, as we go on, the Bengals even make even greater strides. But Tyler Boyd remains one of the best receivers in Bengals history, statistically, leadership wise, and again, man, I mean, I loved his redemption really towards the beginning of his career with that play against the Ravens to catapult the Bills into the playoffs. We talked about that with him when he was on our show, and just what that meant to his career trajectory. And then his leadership that he exuded in 2019, John, that when that year was just an absolute train wreck of a year, rookie head coach, et cetera. And he's, dragging his dead leg across the field against Miami in a game that was essentially, it ended up deciding the Bengals getting Joe Burrow and the Dolphins getting Tua. So, I mean, there's many, and then, the Migos and, all kinds of different stuff. Just a really, really, and I don't mean to overshadow Marcus Bailey on it, but just an outstanding football player for a long time for this team and meant a lot. So it was time, but it still makes it a difficult departure.
Yeah, I think he and Mixon are the two departures that really signify like this is a different page in the book of Burrow, I guess, in a really dramatic way of saying that, right? Because like those two were here for the really bad days, and they were leaders for the resurgence of the franchise. And I think with them now out of the picture, it opens up new doors, new possibilities for what the team is around this quarterback, and how maybe that specific Super Bowl window is closed, but a new one is opening with a bunch of a bunch of new characters and new supporting cast and everything. And that's just how the NFL is now in free agency. It's how it's been for a while. I think a lot of us have romanticized some of our favorite players staying on the same team forever and retiring with one team. And like I said, like that's just not, it's not normal anymore. Like these guys have chances to continue extending their careers and extending, their career earnings and whatnot. And that's completely within their right. And that's what they should do, honestly. And it's up to the team to really construct the best roster possible. And that's just where the crosswords kind of were. But no, at 8 or 9, I think it was like 8 really productive years for Tyler Boyd with the Bengals.
8.
And yeah.
He'll be missed. That's for sure. But, a guy that just did a lot for the team, over the years. And you hate to see him go, but it like you said, I think this is a really good situation for him in terms of the coach he's landing with and everything else that goes with that. But if you can go back to I'm trying to find a couple of other clips here, but go back to some of our interviews with Marcus Bailey, Tyler Boyd as well. They were fun, great guys. And it was in the earlier years, and given that they were nice enough to give us the time of day. But we're going to get on out of here. Happy early Mother's Day to everybody. Have a great weekend, John. Have fun celebrating with your family. And we will be back with more on the Orange and Black Insider. Again, subscribe to the YouTube channel underneath John by that show icon. Click that. Click the bell to be notified when we go live and when new content is available. Click that subscribe button. Click the thumbs up on the Cincy Jungle Facebook page. And, of course, on the audio side of things, go subscribe now on the Believe Network. Believe in Cincy. Resubscribe to that channel where you can get our show, 3 and Out with Jason and Kevin, Talking Football with Bengal Jim and Friends. And, of course, all the good stuff that Matt Minnick, the coach, puts out there. So take care, everybody. Happy early Mother's Day, and we will see you soon. I think all of us that follow the NFL, that follow